At her birthday dinner, as I helped her in the kitchen, I watched her pour something into my glass, a clear liquid from a tiny vial she quickly tucked away. "Special sangria for my favorite son-in-law," she said with that overly sweet smile. I smiled back, thanked her, and casually switched my glass with her husband's when she turned her back. 45 minutes later, he was bent over the toilet, pale and shaking. "My name is Ethan Brooks, 34 years old, and I'm a freelance filmmaker based in Portland, Oregon. I've spent the last decade building a career I love: documentaries, commercial projects, the occasional indie festival feature. It's not traditional, but it pays the bills and fulfills me. Unfortunately, my wife's parents, especially her mother, Patricia, have never seen it that way. Every family gathering follows the same script. Her dad, Howard, throws passive-aggressive jabs about real jobs, while Patricia dotes on my wife, Rachel, and pretends I don't exist. I endure the small talk, the judgmental looks, the questions masked as concern. I keep quiet for Rachel's sake. She's close to her parents despite their condescension. And I've never wanted to put her in the middle. But that night felt different. I'd just gotten back from a 10-day shoot in Alaska. I was exhausted, running on fumes. But Rachel begged me to come. "It's just dinner, an hour or two," she said. I agreed, out of love for her, but the moment Patricia cornered me in the kitchen, I felt it: something was off. Her tone was too cheerful, her eyes too watchful. And that drink, it shimmered strangely under the light. I didn't know what she put in it, but I knew better than to trust her. So I made a silent choice, one that changed everything. I handed the drugged glass to Howard and waited. When he stumbled to the bathroom, clutching his stomach, I stayed calm. Quietly pocketed the untouched glass meant for me, and realized something chilling. Patricia hadn't just tried to humiliate me. She had tried to drug me. And now, she knew I knew. Howard's groans echoed down the hall like a warning siren. Patricia rushed after him, panic barely masked by concern. Rachel jumped up from the table, eyes wide, asking what was wrong. I kept my expression neutral and simply said, maybe something didn't sit right with him. Inside, my heart was pounding, but not from fear. From clarity. Patricia had tried to drug me. And she'd failed. As Rachel went to help her mother, I stared down at my untouched dessert, letting the moment sink in. This wasn't just tension or judgment anymore. This was warfare. And Patricia had just fired the first real shot. The worst part? I wasn't surprised. From the day I met Rachel's parents, I knew I wasn't what they'd envisioned for their daughter. Howard, a retired corporate attorney, spoke to me like I was a teenager with a skateboard instead of a professional with international credits. "Still doing those little movie projects?" he'd ask with a smug grin. Patricia was less direct, but her disapproval seeped through every interaction: backhanded compliments about my work, questions about when I planned to get a steady job. Introductions where she'd skip my name entirely and just call me the filmmaker. They tolerated me. Barely. And only, I think, because Rachel had chosen me so fiercely. She and I met at a gallery screening where one of my short films was featured. She was working in non-profit environmental advocacy, brilliant and bold. The kind of woman who challenges everything and inspires everyone. I fell fast. She did too. But while our relationship grew stronger, her parents became colder. I tried everything: gifts, gestures, patience. But nothing ever thawed them. Now, after the stunt Patricia pulled, I realized it had never been about winning them over. It was about control. They weren't just judging me, they were trying to manipulate Rachel, to shape her world by erasing the parts they didn't approve of. I'd always suspected it, but now I had proof. And not just suspicions, evidence. That night, after Rachel and I got home, I tucked the spiked glass into a padded case in my camera bag. I didn't tell her what I'd seen. Not yet. I needed answers first. And when I had them, I planned to expose Patricia not with rage, but with precision. The same way I build my films, shot by shot, frame by frame. Until the whole truth is undeniable. The following Monday, while Patricia was likely busy rewriting the dinner disaster as bad oysters or a freak stomach bug, I made a quiet visit to Nathan Cole. An old client and friend who ran a private toxicology lab downtown. I didn't need to say much, he knew me well enough to sense this wasn't for a documentary. Personal or professional, he asked. Raising an eyebrow as I handed over the sealed glass wrapped in a plastic evidence bag. Let's call it family business, I replied. 3 days later, his name flashed on my phone. Ethan, he said. Voice tense. There were benzodiazepines in that drink. Not enough to kill you, but enough to knock you out cold. Could have caused memory loss too. Where'd you get this? I didn't answer. I just thanked him and asked for a full written report. That night, I told Rachel I needed to skip the usual Sunday dinner. I've got too much editing to do, I said, and it wasn't a lie. I had plenty of work, and now, a new project, uncovering just how deep Patricia's web of control went. Over the next 2 weeks, I started digging. Turns out, Patricia had multiple prescriptions for Xanax, written by 3 different doctors across the state. Dig a little deeper. And stories started surfacing, small-town whispers that had never quite reached Rachel. There was an incident at a neighborhood gathering where Patricia accused a guest of stealing silverware. At her country club, someone claimed she'd slipped out with a bracelet that wasn't hers. Nothing ever stuck, of course. Too much money and influence for that. I started compiling everything, prescription records, lab reports, eyewitness gossip, organizing it like one of my documentaries, chronological, airtight, impossible to ignore. Then, as if the universe wanted to hand me the perfect opportunity, Rachel came into my studio holding her phone. This is weird, she said. My mom asked if you could take some new photos for her social media. Headshots or something. She specifically requested you. I paused. This wasn't just coincidence. This was Patricia. Trying to regain control of the narrative. I smiled gently and said, sure, if she wants me to. Happy to help. What she didn't know was that the next time I stepped into her house, I wouldn't just be carrying my camera gear. I'd be carrying the truth. That Saturday, I arrived at Patricia and Howard's house alone. Rachel had plans with friends, which worked out perfectly. I didn't want distractions, not today. I had my camera bag in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. Inside was the toxicology report, copies of Patricia's overlapping Xanax prescriptions, and a few screenshots of online forum posts from local neighbors describing some of her more erratic behavior. Patricia greeted me at the door wearing a tailored blouse and too much perfume. Ethan, she beamed, thank you for coming. I want to look professional but warm. You know, approachable. Of course, I said, setting my gear down in the living room. Before we start, though, there's something I think you should see. I handed her the envelope. She opened it with the confidence of someone who still thought they were 2 steps ahead. But the moment her eyes hit the lab report, her hands began to tremble. She flipped through the contents quickly, prescription records, timestamps, dosage levels. Her face drained of color. This is ridiculous, she whispered. I would never. We both know what you did, I interrupted, my voice calm. What I don't know is why. She looked up at me then, and for a moment, the mask slipped. The charming mother-in-law facade cracked, and the cold woman beneath surfaced. You're not good enough for my daughter, she said, voice steady now. You never have been. A man should provide security, not, whatever it is you do. And drugging me? I asked. That's your version of protecting Rachel? Her tone sharpened. It wasn't going to hurt you. Just make you miss that ridiculous gallery opening you kept talking about. I wanted her to see that you weren't dependable. I let the silence stretch between us. Then I said, "Here's what happens now. You tell Howard the truth. You both start treating me with basic respect, not because you believe in me, but because the alternative is Rachel finding out everything." She scoffed. "She'll never believe you over us." I picked up my camera bag. "Maybe not. But she'll believe the lab results, the records, and the people in town you've burned bridges with. You ready to risk your relationship with your daughter over this?" Patricia didn't answer. But her silence said everything. That night, Patricia beat me to the punch. Rachel came home quiet, confused. "My mom said the photo session went weird," she said, setting her bag down. "She said you were confrontational. That you made threats." I didn't respond immediately. I just walked into my office, pulled the envelope from my drawer, and handed it to her. She sat at the kitchen table and flipped through it in silence. The lab report. The prescription records. The quiet pile of truth. "My mother wouldn't do this," she said softly. But her voice lacked conviction. "She tried to make me miss the gallery event," I said. "She drugged the drink, Rachel. I watched her do it." I didn't say anything because I needed to be sure. Rachel stared down at the paper in her hands like it might suddenly rearrange itself into something less painful. She said it was food poisoning. She and Dad both did. "Because if they admit the truth," I said gently, "they lose their grip on you. This isn't just about me. It never was. It's about control." For the next 2 weeks, Rachel barely spoke to me. She visited her parents more than usual. Every time she came back, her eyes were red. She told me less and less, and I let her have the space she needed. Meanwhile, I worked. Long hours in my studio. Editing footage. Sorting files. Waiting for something to break. Then, one afternoon, a small, unmarked envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Just my name. Scrawled across the front in neat, careful handwriting. Inside was a USB drive and a short note, "You should see this. Vanessa." Vanessa was Howard and Patricia's daughter-in-law. Married to Rachel's brother, Daniel. She'd always been quiet at family dinners, always observant. I plugged in the drive and opened the files. Home security footage. There was Patricia in the kitchen, clearly slipping something into one of the glasses of sangria. Then me, walking in. Then Howard, unknowingly drinking from the wrong glass. But that wasn't all. The next file showed Patricia screaming at Howard after we'd left. "Why did you drink his glass?" she shrieked. "You ruined everything." And Howard? He didn't look surprised. He looked tired. Like this wasn't the first time. I watched the clip 3 times, barely blinking. Patricia yelling, Howard retaliating. The words, "This isn't the first time you've done something like this," echoing in my head. That wasn't just guilt, it was history. He knew. He'd seen this side of her before. Maybe he'd even enabled it. The next video was dated 2 days after the dinner. They were in the living room, Patricia pacing, Howard sitting stiffly in an armchair, drink in hand. "He knows what you did," Howard said flatly. "So what?" Patricia snapped. "It's his word against mine. Rachel will never choose him over us." "And if she does?" Howard asked quietly. Patricia's face twisted into something cruel. "Then she's not the daughter I raised. But don't worry, I've already started talking to her about the marriage. Planting seeds. By the time I'm done, she'll think divorce was her idea." I leaned back from my desk, pulse racing. This wasn't about me anymore. It never had been. Patricia had a system. A method. She didn't just manipulate, she isolated. She dismantled. She bent people to her will, then made them believe it was their own decision. Rachel wasn't the first victim. And she wouldn't be the last, unless I stopped it. I called Vanessa immediately. She answered on the second ring. "Why did you send this to me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Because I know what they're doing to you," she said quietly. "They did it to me, too." I swallowed hard. "You mean Patricia tried to?" "She didn't need to drug me," Vanessa said. "But she spent 2 years trying to break me and Daniel apart. Said I wasn't smart enough, classy enough. She made him question everything. It almost worked." "Why didn't you tell Rachel?" "Because Daniel wouldn't believe it. He still doesn't. He thinks I'm paranoid." Her voice cracked a little. "I saw what she was doing to you, and I couldn't watch it happen again." I thanked her, and after we hung up, I sat in silence. Now I had the truth. I had footage. I had a pattern. It was time to bring it all to light, not with anger, but with precision. The same way you expose a lie in a documentary. Frame by frame. Fact by fact. Until there's nowhere left to hide. The next day, I got a text from Howard. "We should talk. Man to man. No wives." I met him at his country club, in a private lounge that smelled like old cigars and expensive regret. He poured himself a drink without asking if I wanted one. "Ethan," he started, "families are complicated. My wife, she's protective. Misguided sometimes. But she means well." I folded my arms. "Drugging someone means well?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Come on. You really think she meant harm? Patricia takes medication. It's possible she got the glasses mixed up. I have the lab results." I said evenly. "And I've seen the footage." Howard's expression didn't flinch, it hardened. The charming mask dropped like a stone. "What do you want?" he asked. "Money? A career boost?" "I always knew you married Rachel for something." I didn't rise to the bait. "I want you both to leave us alone. Stop trying to sabotage our marriage. Stop trying to control Rachel's life." Howard leaned forward, his voice a low hiss. "You think this is the first time we've dealt with someone like you? People come and go. Rachel always comes home. Ask her about Tommy." "Tommy?" I echoed, cold creeping up my spine. "Her ex-fiancé," he said with a smug smile. "Nice guy. Doctor. We didn't like his attitude. Took us 6 months to convince her he wasn't right for her. Planted a little doubt here, a little evidence there. She broke it off and came home crying. Daddy to the rescue." I left without another word. On the drive home, I called Rachel's old college roommate, Melissa. "Tommy," she said, her voice immediately dropping. "God, that was awful. He was perfect for her, but her parents convinced her he was cheating. They manipulated everything, texts, phone calls, even made it seem like he was seeing someone else. He tried to explain, but by then, she didn't trust him. The pattern was undeniable. They'd been doing this for years. Undermining, manipulating, isolating. Anyone who didn't fit their vision of Rachel's life got cut out, one way or another. And now, I had the receipts. The evidence. The names. The stories. It wasn't just about proving what they did to me. It was about proving what they'd done to her. I didn't confront Rachel right away. Not about Tommy. Not about any of it. I needed to be thorough. Careful. Her entire world was about to shift, and I had to make sure the ground I stood on was solid. So, I kept digging. I tracked down Tommy. He was reluctant to talk at first, understandably. But when I explained everything that had happened, he sighed and said, "I always knew something wasn't right." He sent me old emails between him and Rachel, messages her parents had intercepted or twisted. There were sudden breaks in communication she never meant to cause. Deleted texts. Voicemails that never got to her. It was a digital erasure, slow and subtle. By the time Tommy realized it, the damage was done. I didn't stop there. I reached out to other people from Rachel's past, old friends who had mysteriously drifted away, former coworkers she no longer mentioned. One after another, the same story emerged. Patricia and Howard had quietly, consistently sown doubt, made comments, orchestrated misunderstandings. Anyone who encouraged Rachel's independence, or didn't fit their version of acceptable, was slowly pushed out. Meanwhile, Vanessa was sending me more security footage from the house. I don't know how she got access, but I didn't ask. I was just grateful she did. One clip showed Howard and Patricia talking in the kitchen. Once they split, "We'll convince her to move back in," Howard said, like he was discussing business strategy. "She can help with the foundation. Maybe meet someone more suitable." "They were never a good match," Patricia added. "She needs stability. Not someone chasing camera projects around the world." That was it. The smoking gun. The intention was clear. They weren't trying to protect Rachel, they were trying to shape her future by force. I compiled everything, emails, video files, screenshots, testimonies, onto a single USB drive. Then I invited Daniel and Vanessa over for dinner. I didn't tell Rachel why. Not yet. When we finished eating, I connected my laptop to the TV and turned to them all. "There's something you need to see," I said. And for the next hour, the truth played out in front of them. One clip at a time. I hit play. Rachel, Daniel, and Vanessa sat in silence as the living room was filled with Patricia's voice, accusatory, sharp, unmistakable. Clip after clip rolled. Her slipping something into my drink, Howard drinking it unknowingly, the screaming match that followed, and the cold admissions about planting seeds to destroy our marriage. When the last video faded to black, no one spoke for a moment. Rachel sat with her hands in her lap, eyes glassy, lips parted as if struggling to breathe. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she finally whispered. "Because I needed you to see it for yourself," I said softly. "Not just what they did to me, but what they've been doing to you. Your entire life." Daniel was shaking his head. Muttering, "That's not them. That's not my parents." Vanessa reached for his arm. "Daniel, it is. You know it. Why do you think they suddenly accepted me after we had James?" "Because they finally had leverage." He stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Rachel didn't say much the rest of the night. She just sat quietly, absorbing everything. And I didn't push. I knew how deep this betrayal ran. It wasn't just about the drink anymore. It was about a lifetime of manipulation. Later that evening, as we were getting ready for bed, she turned to me with red eyes. "My mom called," she said. "She wants me to come stay with them for a while. Said maybe we need space. Said she's worried about me." I looked at her carefully. "What do you want to do?" Rachel took a long breath, then met my gaze with something new in her expression. "Resolve. I told her we're all coming over tomorrow night. You, me, Daniel, and Vanessa. No more lies. If they have something to say, they can say it to all of us." And just like that, I knew. She was ready. The reckoning was coming. And this time, I wasn't the one on trial. The next evening, we drove to Patricia and Howard's house. Rachel sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, fingers curled tightly in her lap. In the back seat, Daniel and Vanessa rode in tense silence. No one spoke, but the air between us was electric, charged with everything unsaid, everything about to be confronted. When we walked into the house, Patricia greeted us with an overly bright smile, as if nothing had happened. "So good to see you all. Let's sit down and talk like a family." Howard stood in the corner, arms crossed, his face unreadable. I set up my camera on a tripod. Patricia's smile faltered. "What is this?" "I'm documenting the conversation," I said calmly. "For the family archive. This is private business." She snapped. "Exactly," I replied. "Family business. And I'm family, despite your efforts." For the next 2 hours, we laid everything bare. I presented the lab report, the prescription trail, the manipulated relationships, the footage. Rachel read aloud the emails from her past, the ones Tommy had sent. Vanessa explained what Patricia and Howard had done to her and how long she'd stayed silent. As each piece fell into place, their defense crumbled. Patricia tried tears. Howard tried denial. But we countered every excuse with receipts, video, names. Eventually, even Daniel stopped shaking his head and just sat still, stunned. Rachel stood up. Her voice was steady, clear. "I love you. You're my parents. But what you've done is beyond hurtful, it's controlling, it's cruel. You don't get to decide my life anymore." Daniel followed. "We're not kids. We choose who we love. Who we trust. And this," he gestured to the screen, "this is who you really are." Patricia sobbed, but not from regret. From the loss of control. Howard looked hollow. Like the weight of their exposure had finally caught up. Before we left, I handed Howard a small USB drive. "This has everything. All the footage, records, emails. Keep it. But know this, if you ever try to interfere again, every member of your social circle, your business contacts, your clubs, will get a copy." Howard looked at me with something I hadn't seen before. "Respect. You really came prepared," he said. "No," I said. "I came honest." 6 months passed. Rachel and Daniel both started therapy, individually and together, trying to unravel the emotional knots their parents had spent decades tightening. Patricia and Howard, to their credit, kept their distance. No surprise visits. No manipulative texts. Just the occasional, overly polite message checking in. It felt almost normal. Then, right before the holidays, we received an invitation. Dinner at their house. A fresh start. Rachel stared at the card for a long time. "They're still my parents," she said quietly. "Maybe they're trying. I want to believe that." I nodded. "We go. But on our terms." So we did. The house looked the same, polished, pristine, full of polite silence. Patricia had prepared an elaborate meal. Howard poured drinks and asked about my latest projects, with what almost passed for genuine interest. After dinner, Howard invited me into his study. He poured 2 glasses of scotch and handed one to me. I accepted it but didn't drink. "I've been thinking about your future," he said. "You're talented. Photography's treated you well. But I could help you expand. Bring you into my firm. Junior partner track. High salary. Real stability." I set the glass down. "Why would you offer me that?" "Because," he said, "you're family. And I respect how you handled things. You protected Rachel. You stood your ground. That's what a real man does." I stared at him. "No, Howard. This isn't an olive branch. It's a leash." His smile faded. "I'm not for sale," I continued. "And the fact that you're still trying to buy influence over Rachel's life tells me nothing's really changed." He leaned in. "Don't be foolish. Everyone has a price. I stood. That's where you're wrong. And that's why you'll never understand your daughter. Back in the living room, Patricia was showing Rachel old photo albums. I caught Rachel's eye, gave her the slightest nod. She stood and turned to face them. We have something to share, she said. We're having a baby. The silence was electric. Patricia gasped, instantly shifting into delighted grandmother mode. Howard offered a stiff congratulations. But as I shook his hand, I leaned in and said, quietly, this child will never be part of your game. Ever. And this time, I could tell, he believed me. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived from Howard's attorney. Inside was the deed to the house Rachel and I had been renting. Now officially transferred to our names. Along with it came legal documents establishing a trust fund for our unborn child, no conditions, no strings, no attached note. It wasn't an apology. Howard didn't do apologies. But it was something close, acknowledgement. That spring, our daughter was born. We named her Eliza, after my grandmother, a quiet, strong woman who never raised her voice but always made herself heard. Patricia and Howard visited the hospital. They brought tasteful gifts, took turns holding the baby. And, miraculously, offered no advice, no judgment, no backhanded comments. Just silence, and for once, it felt like peace. Months passed. And the tension that had defined our relationship with them gradually settled into something more manageable. They stayed in their lane. We stayed in ours. No more manipulation, no more lectures. Just carefully measured interactions. One night, as I edited photos in my studio, Rachel walked in with Eliza on her hip. She looked thoughtful. My mom called, she said. She wants us to come for Christmas. I raised an eyebrow. What do you want to do? I think we should go, she said. But with boundaries. We stay at a hotel. We leave when we want. No unsupervised time with Eliza. I smiled. Sounds reasonable. A few days later, another package arrived. It was a glossy annual report from Howard's firm. On the cover and throughout the pages, my photos. Landscapes, portraits, elegant shots of corporate buildings. The work I'd done on my own terms. Inside was a single sticky note. Hired the best photographer I know. Thought you'd want a copy. Howard. It wasn't a truce. It wasn't forgiveness. It was respect. As spring turned to summer. I opened my first photography gallery in downtown Portland. On opening night, Rachel stood beside me, Eliza in her arms, my parents beaming from across the room. Patricia and Howard came too. They didn't stay long. But they looked at my work. Howard shook my hand. Patricia smiled, tight, but real. Later that night, Rachel asked, "Do you think they've changed?" I thought for a long moment. No, I said. But they've finally accepted they can't change us. And for me, that was enough.